Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Answers on Eschatology. My name is Dan Derry, and I am the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. We're in the middle of a study on Matthew chapter 24, and we are looking at the Great Tribulation. Now, in the previous video, we showed you that this Great Tribulation, according to the words of Jesus and Daniel, was fulfilled in the first century. And the culmination of that tribulation was the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. But we also established another important point in the previous video, and that's this. The Great Tribulation of Matthew chapter 24 is in fact the days of vengeance of Luke 21. And we showed you that by comparing Matthew chapter 24, 15 and following with Luke 21, 20 and following. Okay? And what that simply means is that the Great Tribulation was a covenantal judgment upon Old Covenant Israel. It was the days of vengeance and wrath when Jerusalem and Judah, specifically the nation of Israel, was judged covenantally for their violation of the law of Moses. Now, that is very, very important. I'll get into that a little bit later. But what I simply want to do in this video is I want to demonstrate and prove further that that Great Tribulation was in fact a covenantal judgment upon Old Covenant Israel in the first century. And listen, how I want to do that is I want to quote Josephus, okay? Josephus was a first century Jewish historian that was an eyewitness to the war between Rome and the Jews between 67 and 70 AD. He was an eyewitness to the Great Tribulation, and he records some amazing things. One of the things that he records is what I'm gonna quote tonight, okay? And here's how it connects with a covenantal judgment. What Josephus quotes as taking place in the first century was in fact the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy, and that Old Testament prophecy that Josephus says was being fulfilled was the prophecy of a covenantal judgment upon Jerusalem and the nation of Israel for their violation of the law of Moses. Let's jump in. I want to show you this. I'm going to quote out of Josephus, pages 443 and 444. Listen to his account. One woman who had lost everything but her baby to these bloodthirsty Jews then killed her baby son and then roasted him and ate one half of him and kept the other half by her concealed. When the seditious men smelled the horrid scent of this food, they threatened her that they would cut her throat immediately if she did not show them what food she had gotten ready. She replied that she had saved a very fine portion of it for them, and withal uncovered what was left of her son. Hereupon they were seized with a horror and amazement of mind, and stood astonished at the sight when she said to them, "This is mine own son, and what has been done was mine own doing. Come, eat of this food, for I have eaten of it myself." And listen to what these men say. The men left trembling and frightened, and the whole city was overcome by distress when they heard of such a thing. This woman, okay, ate her own son due to the famine and the siege upon Jerusalem between 66, 67, and 70 AD, and Josephus records this. But here's what's amazing. What was taking place at that time, this cannibalism, this mother eating her own son, was actually the fulfillment of a covenantal curse that Jehovah had promised would come upon Israel if they would disobey the Mosaic covenant. Okay? Go with me to Deuteronomy chapter 28 and watch this. This is amazing. You know what? Unfortunately, my computer's not working. I'm going to have to pull out the Bible here. Slow internet. Watch this. Deuteronomy chapter 28, and I'll read verse 49, and then we'll jump down. The Lord will bring a nation against you from afar, from the end of the earth, as the eagle swoops down, a nation whose language you shall not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, who will have no respect for the old, nor show favor to the young. Jump down to verse 52 in Deuteronomy 28. it shall besiege you in all your towns until your high and fortified walls in which you trusted came down throughout your land, and it shall besiege you in all your towns throughout your land, which the Lord your God has given you. Then, at that siege, then you shall eat the offspring of your own body, the flesh of your sons and of your daughters, whom the Lord has given you during the siege and the distress by which your enemy will oppress you. Listen to this. So that you will not give even one of them any of the flesh of his children which he will eat, since he has nothing else left during the siege and the distress by which your enemy will oppress you in all of your towns. That was the prophecy of the Great Tribulation. That's what Josephus said was taking place in the first century in the war of the Jews in between 67 and 70 AD. In other words, listen, what Josephus said was taking place was the fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28. But Deuteronomy 28 was a judgment and a warning of a covenantal wrath that would come upon Israel for their violation of the Mosaic covenant. That means that the Great Tribulation between 67 and 70 AD was in fact the days of vengeance of Luke 21, and it was the covenantal judgment that came upon Old Covenant Israel for their violation of the Mosaic covenant. It was a covenantal judgment of the first century. And listen, this is why this is so important. Because number one, today, there is no Old Covenant. It's been fulfilled and abolished. No one denies that. Number two, Old Covenant Israel does not exist today as a covenant people, okay? The body of Christ, the true Israel, are those in Jesus Christ. They are not the fleshly seed of Abraham that existed in the first century. So here's what we have. People today that are expecting a great tribulation to come in the future are missing the boat, okay? How can a great tribulation, which is the covenantal judgment and wrath of God upon his covenant people, come upon a covenant people that doesn't exist? And how can that wrath and judgment take place to vindicate a covenant, okay, and as the curse of a covenant when that covenant doesn't exist? Are you with me? The Great Tribulation was a covenantal judgment upon Old Covenant Israel for violating the Mosaic covenant. But the covenant people doesn't exist today, and that covenant doesn't exist today. Therefore, the Great Tribulation cannot be in our future. It was a first century tribulation, a first century wrath and judgment, and it was the vengeance of God as a covenantal judgment that came upon Old Covenant Israel in the first century. That's powerful stuff. That is definitive. There is no way to place that we should place the Great Tribulation in our future today. Not unless the Jews, the fleshly seed of Abraham, are still the covenant people, and not unless the Old Covenant is still binding and in effect today, which it's not. We all know that. Therefore, the Great Tribulation of Matthew chapter 24, 21, which was the days of vengeance of Luke 21, was fulfilled in the first century generation, just like Jesus said it would be. Matthew chapter 24, 34. Anyways, that's all for tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. We got lots more to say on the Great Tribulation. We'll see you next time on Answers on Eschatology. Bye for now.